The Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on the third reading of the Telecommunications, TSO, Broadband and Other Matters Amendment Bill. Thank you. That was a very lucid contribution from Mr Williamson. Actually made more sense than most of his contributions in this House. No, that's a bit unfair, and I actually retract that statement. Mr Speaker, you've heard from prior speakers that the Labor Party's disenchanted with both the process and the content of this bill. Mr Speaker, I want to reflect on what I think is the poorest aspect of this bill, and that relates to the uncertainty that we still have as to what is the future regulatory environment in respect of broadband in this country. Now, the bill, as it was introduced into the House, had a proposal that ousted the jurisdiction of the Commerce Commission. That proposition was widely criticised at Select Committee by almost everyone, excepting Telecom. Those who criticised it included both consumer representatives and other industry competitors. Why did they criticise it? They criticised it because they said that the existing telecommunications law provided a framework that ensured that they had at least an ability to compete with the dominant supplier in New Zealand, Telecom, and that if the protections, and that those protections were found in the Commerce Act. They said that they have had decades of problems with the dominant Telecom exercising its dominant position to their detriment, but that in recent years they've made progress in competing against Telecom in reliance on the changes to the law, including the by way of using the powers that the Commerce Commission has if there is improper conduct that is uncompetitive practice by Telecom or any other party using its dominant position. The effect of the proposed changes in the bill was to oust the jurisdiction of the Commerce Commission, and therefore the other competitors said that that put at risk their ability to compete in the market because they could be subject to uncompetitive practice which could effectively make them unprofitable in areas or make the risks too great for them to have confidence to invest in these areas, and therefore they wouldn't invest in these areas, and as a consequence the New Zealand consumer as well as those companies would be worse off because they would face inappropriate conduct or the risk of inappropriate conduct by Telecom without having an effective remedy. The Labor Party was convinced that that was right. The ACT Party were convinced that that was right. The Green Party were convinced that that was right, and the Maori Party were expressing nervousness about that as well. Despite representations by all of the submitters and by the other political parties, no change was made to that legislation at Select Committee. No change was made at Select Committee. The Minister just chirped up then and said, because we didn't have one. Well, you know, he's been in government for 2.5 years and he's saying that he didn't have a solution. He didn't have a solution at the time of the Select Committee. And now he's chirped up and he says he found one. Well, what he found was a convenient solution to get him out of the political dilemma that he faced, which was that he wasn't delivering on his pre-election commitment to roll out broadband in New Zealand. So what happened was that the bill came back to this Parliament without amendment. The bill came back to this Parliament without amendment, and then the Minister, without amendment in respect of this important issue. And then the Minister said, had a road to domestic experience that he'd found some new solution. That hadn't been apparent to him or to his officials during the previous 2.5 years, and that's what he would have this House believe is what caused him to change this legislation by way of supplementary order paper. The alternative view of that history is that he, having heard the criticisms, or his cabinet colleagues and officials, having heard the criticisms of what was being proposed, were nervous that they couldn't carry it off, that they wouldn't get the votes for it, and so they changed their position and instead of ousting the jurisdiction of the Commerce Commission, have left a jurisdiction for the Commerce Commission. Now, yesterday in the House, the Minister criticised me for saying that we are unclear as to what are the effects of the contractual substitute that he has for protecting telecom from the consequences of Commerce Commission intervention. Now, I said in the House yesterday, and I can't be certain whether I'm correct or not because I haven't seen the contract with Telecom. None of us have seen the contract with Telecom other than the Minister, who may have seen drafts of the contract with Telecom. He criticised me nonetheless for misrepresenting the nature of that contract. That's right, said the Minister. He's confirmed that criticism. And the problem that we have in this Parliament is that we don't know what the exact terms are of that indemnity or top-up payment that is promised to Telecom because it's not clear from the bill, Mr Minister. It's not clear from the bill what the provisions of that contract are, and the terms of that contract haven't been released to us. So we're being asked to pass this legislation on an article on the promise from the Minister that we should trust him. And I'm not saying he's distrustful in a dishonesty sense. I'm not wanting to make that implication. I'll make that clear to the House. But we're being asked to trust his judgment on this matter. We're being asked to trust his judgment on that matter, and notwithstanding the mistakes that I've already articulated in the process earlier, and notwithstanding that we can't see these contractual provisions that we are told affect this situation. And we are being told that the effect of these provisions would be to make up the lost revenue. I'm not being told this by the Minister, but we're being told in the newspapers and by some of the industry competitors that the effect of these contractual provisions will be to make up the loss of revenue that Telecom might suffer in the future should they be the subject of regulatory action by the Commerce Commission. So effectively, if that is right, and the Minister says it's not, but he won't produce the contracts to say that it's not, and he just expects to take us on trust, the effect of that would be that what the Minister cannot achieve by way of legislation in this Parliament, because this Parliament will not pass legislation that gives Telecom a blank slate in terms of future competitive practice in the absence of Commerce Commission jurisdiction, because he can't get that through this House of Parliament, he's resorting to a contractual route to give comfort to Telecom. Now, I think it is pretty obvious that it would be improper of the Minister to do through contract what he can't achieve through change to the legislative practice. And so that's why we have, in this House, asked for disclosure as to whether that's the case. I want to turn to another couple of other points. The first is the obvious. Despite the fact that prior to the last election the Minister promised that by this time we'd be having broadband rolled out in many parts of New Zealand, we haven't had that. We're actually still dealing with the paper rather than the physical fibre, that delivers the faster broadband access. The second point is at no stage did he tell the public of New Zealand that in order for him to achieve his broadband rollout, those people that weren't using it were going to have to pay for it. And that's effectively what's happening here. The cost, I'm told, that the cost of copper-based connections is expected to increase as a consequence. Rubbish? The Minister says that's rubbish. Well, we'll put that on record through Hansard, and we'll see if in the future, as a consequence of this... Well, I'm not making it. I'm actually reporting. I'm repeating what has been told to me, Mr Minister, Mr Joyce, and you say it's incorrect. Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because if the alternative is that there is going to be an increase in the price of copper-based access to the internet, that's not something that people were warned about, and that is one of the things that industry participants have been saying. Now, I'm not the Minister. I don't have the same quality of information that he does, and so it is possible that he knows better in some of these areas than I do, and I concede that. But in respect of the issue as to competition practice, I don't accept that he is better informed than the rest of this House, and that's why the rest of this House didn't agree with the ouster of the Commerce Commission jurisdiction. I also want to refer to the way in which the government has now garnered the Maori Party vote. The Maori Party say that they're voting in favour of this because they have agreement from the government to set up a working party to consult on broadband delivery for iwi. Well, you know, again, that sort of has shades for me of the deal that was done in respect of changes to the emissions trading scheme. And if the effect of that working party is
Sorry
going
to
to
interrupt the honourable member. His time has expired. I call Joe Goodhue.
Mr Speaker, at